What's going on? MJ Madness here, and today I am giving you my preview video for the 2016-17 NBA season. So basically what I'm going to be doing in this video, I'm going to be starting with the Eastern Conference and giving you my prediction for the standings, then moving over to the Western Conference and giving you my prediction for where I think teams will land, and then finally at the end of the video, I will give you my predictions for all the major awards, like MVP, Rookie of the Year, Sixth Man of the Year, stuff like that. And then finally, I will give you my pick for who I think is going to be the NBA champion in the 2016-17 season. So that's all what's going to be going down in this video. Unfortunately, I don't have too much time. I was really hoping on doing a couple separate videos for each conference and the awards. Unfortunately, I kind of got busy with life, and now the season's starting tonight. So that one's on me, guys. I'm sorry about that. But I thought better put something out there. I mean, it's better than nothing. So I thought may as well make this just for you guys. So this isn't going to be as in-depth as I would have liked it. I might only be able to talk about each team for a bit. But I think I still would like to get something out there and give you my predictions. So without further ado, let's get things started in the Eastern Conference. Okay, so starting in the East, coming at number 15, I'm going with the Brooklyn Nets. I don't know what to say about the Brooklyn Nets. They are a team that is currently in a really bad position. Not just now, but for years into the future. They're a team that doesn't really have much salary cap space, and they're filled with a lot of old, aging veterans and not too many young prospects on that team. Brook Lopez definitely is a talented player, but other than that, there's not much to like on that Brooklyn Nets team. The thing that's almost worse is that they've traded away most of their draft picks, so even though they probably will do absolutely terrible this season and get a high draft pick, that pick will go to the Celtics. Really, things aren't really looking that high up for the Brooklyn Nets. I really think they're a franchise in trouble, and hopefully for them something turns around. But this year, that roster is easily one of the worst in the NBA, and it's going to put them in last in the Eastern Conference. At number 14, I'm going with the Philadelphia 76ers. The 76ers, this is a team sort of like the Nets. They don't really have a great roster, but unlike the Nets, these guys actually have a lot of good young potential. You know, Joel Embiid might start playing this year, which will be good for them. Jahlil Okafor really showed that he can be a starting center in the NBA, and they just have a really good set of young prospects. I'm not really sure how they're going to gel together. People may say people like Nerlens Noel might get traded, stuff like that. I'm not really sure. But I think if the Sixers can just get more progress from their young stars, then I think having a low finish this year won't be that bad for them because they say the 2017 NBA draft class is one of the deepest in recent memory. So I think for the Sixers, having a bad season might actually be a good thing. And definitely years into the future, they'll be much improved. Number 13, I'm going with the Orlando Magic. Now, the Magic also have a pretty good young core. Elfrid Payton, Aaron Gordon. But they made a couple puzzling moves this offseason that shows that they don't really trust that young core, which I don't really like for them. I think what they should have done is just ran with what they had. Instead, they brought in Serge Ibaka from the OKC Thunder, but they really gave up a lot, including Victor Oladipo. So I think they kind of lost that trade. They brought in Bismack Biyombo from the Raptors. He definitely is extremely athletic. I'm not sure if he's the piece that the Magic needed, though, right now. And they're definitely going to be a team, kind of middle of the pack. And they definitely have a couple young stars, but not nearly as deep as, say, the Sixers or the Lakers. So I think this is going to be another mediocre season for the Magic. But hopefully they move on and get stuff to build on, so in the future they can improve. 13th for the Orlando Magic. And at number 12, sticking in Florida, I'm going with the Miami Heat. Now, the Miami Heat, they made the playoffs last year, actually took the Raptors to 7 in that second round, but this offseason has just been brutal for them. The big thing, of course, was losing Dwayne Wade to the Chicago Bulls. That's really tough. He's old, but he's still one of the best shooting guards in the game, so that's really a tough loss. And not only that, Chris Bosh probably won't be able to play at all this season, and maybe not ever again. So just like that, the big three they had of LeBron, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade is basically gone in Miami. And I think the Heat are going to have a few years of struggle before maybe coming back, because they don't really have much of a young core there. I guess Hassan Whiteside's pretty solid. And I think while they're definitely a decent team, I don't think they're going to be anywhere near that playoff bubble this season. And I think things are going to be disappointing for fans of the Miami Heat. At number 11, I'm going with the New York Knicks. Now, a lot of people think the Knicks will actually make the playoffs. And while I do think it's possible they might make a run for it, I just don't really trust the roster that the Knicks have. They've probably had maybe one of the most improved off seasons. They really made some huge moves. Of course, the big one bringing in Derrick Rose. But I think the Knicks don't really realize this isn't 2012 anymore. Derrick Rose isn't going to be able to carry your team. I don't know. It's just overall not really a team that I think is going to get it done. I mean, Carmelo's still Carmelo, but he's getting older. Of course, Porzingis, he is definitely a stud, but I don't think he's going to do it all on his own. So there's definitely some heightened expectations in Manhattan, but I think the Knicks are going to disappoint a couple people and finish up in 11th. At number 10, I'm going with the Chicago Bulls, another team that made quite a few moves this offseason, and another team some people might expect to make the playoffs. I just don't really see that happening. Like, they don't have any shooters on that team. I don't even know if they're going to make a single, three-point shot. Just kidding about that, but it's just not really a great, deep team. I'm not really sure how all the players on the team are going to gel together. Of course, they brought in Dwayne Wade, who's great, but he's old. I'm not sure if he can hang with the best of the NBA anymore, and I don't know how he fits in with some of the other pieces that they brought in. They brought in Rajon Rondo. He's kind of a questionable guy. I don't really like him, just the style of play that he brings to that team. But of course, they do have Jimmy Butler, one of the best players in the NBA right now. He is extremely skilled, also a little underrated in my opinion, and I think he will continue to be as good as he ever has been. But the Bulls just don't really have enough to build around Jimmy Butler, and I think they're going to have a tough season and fall once again out of the playoffs. At number 9, perhaps my most surprising pick for a team that won't make the playoffs, I'm going with the Charlotte Hornets. Now, I'm not going to lie, I like the Hornets, I really do, but I just think they don't have that superstar team that's good enough to make it to the playoffs in a really tough Eastern Conference this year. Kemba Walker's great, but can he carry that team on his own? I'm not really sure. I don't know if I trust Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Nick Batum, definitely decent. Overall, a team that's definitely going to be really close on that bubble. Basically, the 9, the 8, and the 7 seed in this video, I was moving them around interchangeably, because I think all three of them are going to be really close and fighting for those playoff spots. But in the end, I just don't think the Hornets are as deep as the two teams I have above them. They don't have the star power of the two teams I have above them. And in the end, I think the Hornets are going to fall just short of a playoff spot. At number 8, my first big surprise, I'm going with the Milwaukee Bucks. Now, a lot of people really don't see much in this Milwaukee Bucks squad. They see them as a young team, a lot of potential, but might not be able to get it done this year. I think the opposite. I think the Bucks definitely have that potential, but I think finally this is going to be the year where they kind of overachieve a bit and make the playoffs. Giannis Antetokounmpo is one of the best players in the league already. He is absolutely insane, and if that point guard experiment works with him, he could be an absolute monster playing up in point guard. Jabari Parker's really great at slashing to the rim. Chris Middleton, while he be injured for the first couple months of the season, when he comes back, he is one of the most underrated, most reliable shooters in the NBA. They also brought in Dellavedova, who I think fits pretty well into that team. Maybe Greg Monroe makes a kind of a comeback season, which I definitely think is possible. And perhaps most interestingly, they drafted Thon Maker, who definitely, kind of like Giannis Antetokounmpo several years ago, has a ton of untapped potential, but he's really raw. I don't know if he's going to be playing much this season, but he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. Overall, the Bucks just have a really good young squad, and I think they're going to overachieve, surprise a lot of NBA fans, and make the playoffs. And at number 7, another team that a lot of people don't see making the playoffs, I'm going with the Washington Wizards. Now, if you watched my top 5 point guards in the NBA video, you will have noticed that I put John Wall in that video over Kyrie Irving because I truly believe he is that good. I think they're similar players, but Kyrie's definitely in a better situation in Cleveland, and John Wall is still being able to get it done. He is one of my favorite players to watch, and I think he's really, really solid. And definitely, maybe because he's playing in Washington, doesn't get enough credit for what he's doing there. They also have Bradley Beal, another really good young superstar, and I think if he can stay healthy, the Wizards definitely have a team that can make some noise in the Eastern Conference. Overall, they have some good pieces, a good leader on that team in John Wall, and I think they're going to make the playoffs and surprise some people as well. Coming in at number 6, I'm going with the Atlanta Hawks. Now, the Atlanta Hawks have been pretty solid as of recently, like the 3rd seed last year, 2nd seed the year before. But the big thing for them this offseason was they lost Al Horford. And he was, I think, one of the main guys leading that team. And I think that's really going to hurt them this year. Now, they still have Paul Millsap, and I think he alone is going to really help lead that team to the playoffs. But again, Paul Millsap's extremely old and leaving in free agency this offseason. So I think they have a lot of questions on that team. They definitely do have some solid pieces, some aging pieces, may I add in. Some veterans, Kyle Korver, maybe Dennis Schroeder turns it around. Who knows? Overall, this is a team in transition, and I think they're still good enough to make the playoffs, but definitely have some questions that need answering in the upcoming years. At number 5, a team I really see on the rise because of one of their young stars, the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons surprised a lot of people by making the playoffs as the 8th seed, and I think they've only gotten better. Andre Drummond is one of the best centers in the NBA, and I think he's going to only improve. He is a young star, definitely a stud. Reggie Jackson is one of the most dependable, reliable point guards in the NBA. Definitely just a team full of really good, solid depth pieces, and I think they're going to do pretty well this season, coming in at that 5th seed. Number 4, I'm going with the Indiana Pacers, another team that made some huge improvements this offseason. They brought in some really, really nice pieces, made some trades with the Jazz, and they've made a solid team even better. Paul George is definitely one of the top 10 players in the NBA. We saw just what he could do in the playoffs last year, and I think the Pacers have only gotten better. With the pieces they've added around Paul George, I think the Pacers could make a surprise run, maybe even to the 2nd round, because they definitely have a lot of talent on that team. At number 3, I'm going with the Boston Celtics. Now, maybe the Boston Celtics, actually, are the team that I think have improved the most this offseason, and that is because they brought in Al Horford. He is a top 5 center in the NBA, a really great playmaker. He can drive to the basket, he can dunk, he can rebound. He's really going to be a nice fit on that team. Isaiah Thomas is a really, really solid point guard, definitely gets it done day in, day out, despite his size. And I think the Celtics just have some really nice pieces on that team. Maybe no true superstar like teams like the Pacers have, but they still definitely have some really good stars on that team. They brought in Jaylen Brown. They have a lot of good assets like draft picks, young players, stuff like that. And I think this is a really good team that's going to make the playoffs as that 3rd seed. Coming in at number 2, I'm going with the Toronto Raptors. Now, the big thing the Raptors needed to do this offseason was re-sign their shooting guard DeMar DeRozan, and they did that for another few years, so I think that's really good for them. Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan really help carry that team from the backcourt, and I think once again they're going to be a team that makes some noise in the playoffs. But the way I see it for the Raptors, until they add another piece and make that front court actually dangerous, they're never going to be a team that's going to contend for the title. I think their backcourt's amazing, and Jonas Valanciunas is definitely decent, but they need a really strong center or power forward, and I think if they do manage to bring that in, maybe in the trade deadline, they definitely will be a team that might even make some noise and perhaps be a dark horse contender to even challenge the Cavs. But until they add that piece, I think they're not going to be much more than a team that's going to get run over by the number 1 team in this video, the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think the Eastern Conference is absolutely ruled by LeBron James, and until he retires or gets too old or gets injured, he is going to continue to dominate that Eastern Conference. He's made the finals 6 years in a row. Basically, whatever team he's on, he takes them to the next level. In my opinion, he is without a doubt the best player in the entire NBA. He is so insanely skilled, and he just proved that he hadn't even fallen off a little bit by what he did with that finals performance last year. LeBron James is amazing. Kyrie Irving also has some of the best handles, one of the best point guards in the league. Kevin Love definitely is solid. They have J.R. Smith. They have Tristan Thompson. It is an amazingly deep team, and they are the team to beat in the Eastern Conference, and the team that I think will run away with that number 1 seed in the 2016-17 season. Okay, so now let's move on over to the Western Conference. So, coming in at number 15, I am going with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, of course, the Lakers just had Kobe Bryant retire, but last year, because of his age, he wasn't even really much of a difference maker on that team anyway, so I don't really think that's going to make too much of a difference. The Lakers have a really solid young core, Jordan Clarkson, but the big one that I see is D'Angelo Russell. He is, I think, going to be in the running for the Most Improved Player award. He really has a lot of skill, and I definitely think he's going to really make some big strides this season and show that the Lakers are a team that will be successful in a couple seasons. They also drafted Brandon Ingram with that number 2 overall pick. He's kind of a dark horse pick for the Rookie of the Year. I think he could be something special. And overall, they just have a really good team of young pieces, but they aren't quite ready to take it to the next level just yet. I predict another disappointing season for the Lakers, but hopefully they use that, draft another top prospect to add to their already exciting young core, and build a team that's going to be competing for multiple championships in the future. At number 14, the NBA's most messy organization that I think makes the worst moves, the Sacramento Kings. This organization is an absolute disaster. They were gifted the best center in all of the NBA, DeMarcus Cousins, through the draft, and despite having him, they've managed to absolutely ruin the team around him, not giving Boogie a single decent player to play with, and leaving him stuck on a terrible team. The Kings have made multiple questionable decisions. I think their management needs to be reorganized, their owner change, because they really need something different in Sacramento. They've made so many mistakes, and they haven't even been able to put a decent team around DeMarcus Cousins, because that alone might help them to make the playoffs. DeMarcus Cousins is in a league of his own, but the rest of the players on the court are barely even NBA caliber, and it's really disappointing to see DeMarcus Cousins stuck on a team as bad as the Sacramento Kings. They don't even have prospects that are really going to be stars in the future, and their outlook just really isn't great, sort of like the Nets over in the Eastern Conference. In the end, I think the best thing for the Kings would be for DeMarcus Cousins to take. Please trade him to an actual decent team that knows how to contend. I would actually love personally to see DeMarcus Cousins go to the Toronto Raptors. I think that could make them a really solid team. But that's really all I want to see in Sacramento, and I just really despise watching such a mess of an organization. At number 13, I'm going with the Denver Nuggets. This team is kind of stuck in transition. They got some really young players, but also some old veterans as well, people like Danilo Gallinari. And I think the best thing for them is to rid themselves of some of those old guys and start building young. I think their best young piece, Nikola Jokic, he's the Serbian-born center, and he is definitely going to be someone to look out for. He has pretty sweet handles, he can dribble, he can shoot pretty well, and I think he's going to help lead that team in the future to become someone who's going to be pretty great. He's not just there yet. This team isn't just there yet. And I think while we shouldn't sleep on the Nuggets, this isn't just yet their year. At number 12, a team I see falling out of the playoffs after years of making it, the Dallas Mavericks. Now, the Mavericks, a lot of people see them in, but I think this is finally the year where the Mavericks fall off. They made some really questionable offseason moves. They still have Dirk Nowitzki, but he's like 40 years old, and I just don't know if he can handle it at that level anymore. Overall, the Mavericks just aren't the team that they used to be, and unfortunately, I think this is where things fall off the rails, and the Mavericks disappoint by not making the playoffs. Number 11, I'm going with the New Orleans Pelicans. This team is Anthony Davis, who is an absolute beast, one of the top 10 players in the NBA, and of course he's also only 22 years old. I have no doubt within a couple years he's going to be at the top of the list, and he is an absolute monster, but unfortunately the Pelicans haven't really been able to build too much around him. Drew Holiday is definitely decent. They drafted Buddy Hield with that 5th overall pick. He is a really solid shooter who's going to help that team a lot, but he's not ready yet. And I think even though Anthony Davis will continue to be amazing, the Pelicans just don't have enough around him to make a serious run for the playoffs. At number 10, a team I see surprising a lot of people. This team many people pick to be near the bottom of the Western Conference. I see them in at number 10, and that is the Phoenix Suns. Now, people think the Suns are a team that doesn't really have much of a shot, but I would have to disagree. They have Brandon Knight and Eric Bledsoe, two extremely solid core pieces, especially Eric Bledsoe, who is going to make your team decent no matter what. But the biggest piece I see on that Phoenix Suns team is Devin Booker. This guy, he was just drafted last year, and he is already one of the best players in the NBA. He has so much potential, it's absolutely insane. And I think he is going to be an absolute monster for the Suns this season. Now, they don't quite have enough to make the playoffs, just because the Western Conference is extremely deep, and they don't really have a strong enough team coming off the bench and stuff like that. But overall, I think they're really going to improve, surprise a lot of people. Devin Booker is going to make some great strides forward, and this is a team I see surprising a lot of people in years to come, because they definitely have some good young pieces on that team. At number 9, this was probably the toughest decision for me on this list, because the team I'm putting here has been a consistent playoff team and hasn't really moved on from that core. But I'm going with the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, the Grizzlies definitely have some really gritty, strong pieces. Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph. It's really just a really solid team. But overall, despite having these pieces, I just don't really think that they have what it takes anymore. Last year, they got into a bunch of injury trouble, and I don't really trust this team to stay healthy. They just re-signed their point guard to a lot of money, but I don't really know if he is going to be the one that can take them to that next level. They've been a really just unimpressive but solid playoff team, but I think with the rising teams in the Western Conference, this is the year the Grizzlies just fall out of the playoff picture, and I think they barely miss the playoffs. And unfortunately for Grizzlies fans, I'm putting them at 9th. At number 8, my dark horse pick of the video and the team I see sneaking into the playoffs, the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, this one is probably going to surprise a lot of people. The Timberwolves were one of the worst teams in the NBA, 3rd worst actually last year. But this team has so many young pieces, and I think with their brand new coach, Tom Thibodeau, this is the year where those pieces finally progress and they really overachieve and make the playoffs. Now, they have Andrew Wiggins, the former 1st overall pick, who maybe hasn't lived up completely to the hype, but he's definitely been really solid, and I expect him to take some big strides forward. They drafted Chris Dunn. I think he's going to be the steal of the 2016 draft. Definitely a candidate for Rookie of the Year. He is extremely talented. Ricky Rubio still at point guard. Definitely, Zach LaVine, he won the dunk contest. He's really good as well. But the biggest piece that team has, the next NBA superstar, Karl Anthony Towns. Now, if you've been on my channel for a while, you'll know how much I love Karl Anthony Towns, and I've made several videos ranting about him, so I'm not going to go into too much detail here. But basically, Karl Anthony Towns is the best young player in the NBA right now. He is so talented. He was just drafted 1st overall 2 seasons ago, won Rookie of the Year unanimously, and I think he alone is going to carry the Timberwolves team to the playoffs because he completely has what it takes. With the strong supporting cast they have around him, and they just brought in Tom Thibodeau as well, one of the best defensive coaches in the NBA, I think the Timberwolves are going to shock the NBA and make the playoffs. Coming in at number 7, I am going with the Houston Rockets. Now, the Rockets don't have a great team except for one small thing, James Harden. Say what you will about his defense, but he is probably the best pure scorer in the NBA. He can shoot, he can dribble, he can lay up, he is really, really talented, and I think he alone is really going to carry that Rockets team on his back to another playoff spot. While they definitely disappointed last year, I think they're going to be a team that's going to make the playoffs quite comfortably, and who knows, with James Harden, if he happens to go off, you never know what could happen in the playoffs once they get there. The Rockets are maybe not a great team, but as long as they have James Harden, they will always be in a team in the conversation for that playoff spot. In at number 6, the team I see falling the most, probably, the Oklahoma City Thunder. And that is because they lost, in my opinion, the third best player in the NBA, Kevin Durant, in free agency. Now, say what you will about his decision. I personally think I don't really have any issue with it, even though I may not like it. But his loss is really going to hurt that team. Him and Russell Westbrook really carried that team on their back. They were one win away from the NBA Finals last year, and I think it's disappointing to see him leaving that team without taking them to that next level. But, of course, they still have Russell Westbrook, and now Russell Westbrook will be angry and seeking vengeance. And I think he is definitely someone who is going to be a strong candidate for that Most Valuable Player award in this season, because I think he is going to absolutely tear up the NBA and alone lead that OKC team to comfortably make the playoffs. While it's definitely disappointing that they lost Kevin Durant, they brought in some nice pieces like Victor Oladipo, some nice draft picks, and they still have Russell Westbrook. So they'll definitely be another solid year for the OKC Thunder. At number 5, I'm going with Rip City, the Portland Trail Blazers. Now, the Blazers have a really good young star, Damian Lillard, leading them from the back at point guard. And they have CJ McCollum now. Well, I guess they've had him for a bit. A running mate who really can help out Damian Lillard. And those two really help that team. And I think they're going to take some big steps forward and make the playoffs as that 5 seed. Last year, they made the second round. Coming in as a 6 seed actually, sort of just because Chris Paul got injured. But I think this year they're going to be a team that's not going to get gifted into that second round spot, but rather earn it and actually make some noise. Damian Lillard, maybe because he plays in a small market city that plays their game at 11 p.m. Eastern, but he doesn't get nearly enough credit that he deserves, and I think he is an extremely talented player. Not only that, he just dropped a rap album, The Letter O. I actually listened to it. It's low-key fire, so just something you guys should check out if you're in the mood. Definitely something interesting. That on the side, though, his basketball skills are absolutely amazing. Him and CJ McCollum are going to really help lead that team, and I see them perhaps surprising some people, but I think they can make that 5th seed. And at number 4, another huge surprise in this video. If you haven't noticed, I really like making some crazy predictions. I think why stick with the mainstream, and I'd rather go out there and do some kind of interesting, fun stuff. And I think definitely this one is probably one of the more out there and outlandish predictions, but it's definitely a possibility. And in at number 4, I am predicting that we have the Utah Jazz. While the Jazz may not have one true superstar, I think they have the best, most well-rounded cast in all of the NBA, because they're too deep at basically every single position, got probably one of the best bench, one of the most all-around best starting lineups, because while they don't, again, as I said, while they may not have one superstar, they have 5 extremely talented players. I think the best of them is Gordon Hayward. He is also extremely underrated because of perhaps that small market status, but he definitely needs to get some more love. They made some moves this offseason that's going to take them even higher to that next level. A lot of people are really high on the Jazz, and I agree with them. I think even though they didn't even make the playoffs last year, they're going to make some big steps forward. And while they won't be a contender for the title, they'll be a team that I think will comfortably make the playoffs and definitely surprise a lot of NBA fans. The Utah Jazz are my pick for number 4. At number 3, the team that perpetually and consistently disappoints us in the playoffs, the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, that big three of Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan is still intact, but with both of Chris Paul and Blake Griffin approaching free agency and that cast getting older and older, I really think soon their window for contending for a championship is going to expire. Chris Paul is aging, Jamal Crawford is really old, and overall, while they do have Blake Griffin, this team, I don't really like the direction that they're heading, because I think they've proven that they can't win with the team that they have. Despite having two of the NBA's best players on that team, Griffin and Paul, they've never really been able to make it past that second round, and it's just been year after year of playoff disappointments. Now, while some of that can be attributed to injury, I just think the Clippers will, of course, still make the playoffs because they do have those superstars up front. But I think another disappointing season is in the works for the Clippers, and I think some changes will need to be made in the offseason coming up. At number 2, I'm going with the San Antonio Spurs. Now, the Spurs had an insane season last year. It was kind of just hidden because of how good the Warriors did. But Kawhi Leonard, he is so good. I can't say enough about him. Best defensive player in the NBA. And I'm really excited for that opening night matchup between the Spurs and the Warriors that takes place later today, because that's going to be a really good game. Now, of course, they did have Tim Duncan retire, which is disappointing, but I really think at his age he wasn't contributing much anyway, so that's not going to be too big of a loss. They brought in Pau Gasol, and I think that's a smart move for them, because the Spurs always make smart, solid moves, and they're definitely the team that I think has the best shot to challenge the Warriors for that number 1 seed. They definitely have the pieces to do so, and I think they're going to be leaps and bounds ahead of the 3 seed. Definitely a team that can put up 60 wins, maybe even 65, because they definitely have the talent to do so. And number 1, the most stacked team in all of the NBA, the Golden State Warriors. I don't know what to say about the Warriors. I really don't. They have literally built a super team. Last year, they set the record for the most wins in an entire NBA season with 73-9, and then they brought in the third best player in the NBA. I struggle to comprehend what's going to happen with the Warriors this season. They have 4 absolute superstars, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and the 2 big ones, Steph Curry and now Kevin Durant. When you have 2 of the top 3 players in the NBA on your team, you are going to be good. Now, while the Warriors do have a better team, they've actually decided, at least from what I've been hearing from interviews and stuff, that they're not going to be pushing that win record anymore, and I think that's the smartest thing for them. They kind of collapsed in the finals against the Cavs, so instead they're taking the smarter approach, which is instead of going all for it, pushing in the regular season, they kind of make sure to rest their players, keep them healthy without injury, and then take it into second gear in the playoffs. And I think for them, that's the best possible course of action. While they may not break that season wins record anymore, I think they're still going to be an absolute scary team to play against, and definitely the odds-on favorite to win the title this season. So those are my picks for both the Eastern and Western Conference. And now to end off the video, let's quickly break down my picks for all of the major awards. Okay, so I'm going to break down my picks for all of the awards, and then to end things off, my pick for who's going to win the NBA. So first off, let's start with Coach of the Year. I am going with Tom Thibodeau of the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, as I said, I think the Timberwolves are going to surprise the NBA and make the playoffs, and I think their brand new coach, Tom Thibodeau, perhaps one of the best defensive coaches in the NBA, is going to be a big reason for that. So I see him taking home that Coach of the Year award. Sixth Man of the Year, I'm going with Joe Johnson of the Utah Jazz. He was one of the most underrated free agent acquisitions this offseason, and I think with him coming off the bench, playing maybe 25 minutes, he's going to be extremely solid for that Jazz team, and I see him perhaps a dark horse candidate. I think he's going to win that Sixth Man of the Year. A Defensive Player of the Year. You may have heard me rant on and on about how much I love Kawhi Leonard, and I see him once again winning that Defensive Player award. because he is, after all, the best defensive player in the NBA. He is so good on defense. He blocks, he steals. He can guard any one of the 5 positions. And I think if he stays healthy, he is going to be a lock to win that award because he is so talented. Rookie of the Year, perhaps one of my more surprising picks. I'm going with Chris Dunn of the Minnesota Timberwolves. If you couldn't tell, I'm really high on this Timberwolves team. And I think Chris Dunn, the steal of the 2016 draft, is going to be a big reason for that. The number 1 overall pick, Ben Simmons, is injured for the first 4 months, and I think that puts him out of the running. I don't think Brandon Ingram is ready yet. I don't think Jaylen Brown is ready yet. I think Chris Dunn is the most prepared for the NBA, and while he may not be the best player from this draft class long term, over the course of this season, I think he'll be the best. Most improved player, Devin Booker of the Phoenix Suns. This one's perhaps another surprise pick, but I just think he's so talented, he's extremely skilled, and he's going to be the one that gets it done. And he's going to make so many big strides forward and surprise and get that most improved player. Finally, my most valuable player award, James Harden of the Houston Rockets. I think he's going to single-handedly carry the Houston Rockets on his back to the playoffs. Now, again, even though the Warriors are the best team on paper, because Kevin Durant and Steph Curry are on the same team, they're going to take some votes away from each other. Same thing with LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. You can't be the most valuable when you're depending on 3 or 4 players. And I think the Rockets depend on James Harden so much, which is why he's going to win that MVP. Finally, my finals pick. Unfortunately, I'm picking a three-peat of the NBA Finals between the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Golden State Warriors. I just don't see how it can't happen, and I'm picking the Golden State Warriors in 6 games. I think their team is too deep not to win the NBA, and as long as LeBron James doesn't go insane, which of course is possible, I think the Warriors have what it takes and will be your 2016-17 NBA champions. So that's it for my preview video. Be sure to hit that like button if you're excited for the NBA season. And if you're a fan, this is really a great time to be on the channel because we got 9 months of upcoming content, so it's really going to be great. I'm planning on doing quite a few NBA videos. Let me know your predictions down in the comments down below. Give me some of your surprise teams, who you think is going to win the NBA, because I love to hear your opinions. So that's it for me. Thank you guys all for watching, and take care.